earliest evidence we have of habitation, of people actually building homes here at the Springs Preserve, comes from our pit house area. These houses were very shallow constructions, maybe excavated down about 3 feet or so into the soil. And then over the top there would have been a superstructure or sort of a dome made out of willow or mesquite or other woody plants like that.
The constant search for food or need to flee marauders meant these shelters had to be easily disassembled or abandoned, so they never left much of a footprint over time. So it took some pretty sophisticated equipment operated by experienced scientists to finally unearth these early homes.
After the Springs Preserve was established in about 2008, we brought in a crew to do remote sensing work. We did ground penetrating radar and resistivity to judge what may have been under the surface of the ground rather than dig it all up. And we got some great results on that. We were able to re-identify a pit house that we had excavated in the early 2000s and found 2 more pit houses that we have remained unexcavated on the site.
Built by the area's indigenous people, these shelters were known as wickiups or kani and were surprisingly effective against seasonal temperature extremes and as protection from the elements. Even though they were small, they accommodated most of the daily activities of life.
So inside of these pit houses, you would have had a fireplace or a hearth, usually centrally located. In some of these other pit houses, you would have had storage pits that would have been excavated into the ground. So you would have had your stove and your refrigerator inside the floor of your house there. And so types of artifacts that we found in our pit house here include stone tools, things like projectile points or scrapers. We also had different types of ceramics, mostly cooking type vessels that would have been used in the fire to help cook their meals.
Moving forward in time, the very earliest European settlers also found this spring site to be a desirable place to make roots.
We know that Mormon missionaries came here in the 1850s and constructed the Mormon fort. We know that they did some activities out here at the Springs as well, but they didn't build any houses, they didn't build any habitations. The next evidence we see of actual occupation here on the Springs Preserve site dates to the late 1800s, anywhere between 1870 and 1890. We know that J.B. Williams and John Howell were 2 ranchers that lived in here and owned 2 sections of land right next to each other. And John Howell, to the best of our knowledge, lived out here at the Springs. And once again, work done by UNLV in the early 1970s identified a dugout structure.
Similar in concept to a pit house, a dugout employed improved technology to add square feet, depth, and much more durable walls and roof structure.
Now here at the Springs Preserve, we were able to identify, in our dugout, we were able to see the adobe bricks. We were able to see cottonwood beams holding up the roof and roof beams on top. And very clearly, it had a south-facing entrance facing directly onto the creek there.
When European settlers came into this land, they soon realized they needed to take some lessons from the indigenous people that preceded them.
Locally sourced dirt beneath your feet can be compressed and mixed and turned into adobe over time. You don't have to go out and cut a bunch of timber down from Mount Charleston and bring it down into the valley. Your building materials are expedient, they're close to you, and you can use them from pretty much anywhere.
As pervasive as adobe construction is across the American Southwest, it was unusual to not find any on site here at the Springs Preserve. Then, an archaeological survey done in the early 2000s uncovered the ruins of an unusually large adobe building just north of the Spring Mound.
They identified an area that looked like adobe melt. It looked like adobe bricks or an adobe wall had over time eroded and sort of flowed down onto the ground around it. This location we found this adobe melt very closely fit a picture that was supposed to have been taken out here, dated to 1906. And the picture is really fantastic. It's a woman sitting on her horse in front of a collapsed adobe brick structure. And the fascinating thing about seeing this woman on the horse is you get an idea how big this house was. And the house was pretty substantial, probably about 20 by 40 feet in size. For that time period, that's pretty big for being made out of adobe bricks.
Perhaps a century had passed from the building of that adobe dwelling and the taking of that photograph, and another century has passed since then. In that time, the population of this area has swelled to over 2 million people, and technology has advanced exponentially. But as our environment warms and water becomes more precious, we are now realizing that in order to make our modern homes as efficient as those built before, it might be a good idea to look to the ways of the past.
Well, when you come to Springs Preserve and you see that span of history, from early habitation camping to pit houses to dugouts to adobe structures to the modern buildings you see here today. There's a lot of lessons that we can learn from people who've come before us. How they built their houses, how they interacted with the environment, what sort of passive ways they used to sort of heat and cool their houses and protect themselves from the elements. We have that all here, and so we can sort of tell that story from front cover to back cover about how life and how habitations and houses have developed in Las Vegas.